Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has been announced. A release of hostages is expected soon, along with an end to the fighting in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry reports. Both President Biden and President-elect Trump taking credit for the ceasefire deal in Gaza. Iris tells us what Biden is saying about the Trump team's involvement and how Trump is reacting to the latest success. On Capitol Hill, Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio has already won the support of some Democrats, but that's not the case for President-elect Trump's other cabinet picks. Luis Martinez brings us the key takeaways from today's Senate confirmation hearings. What can we expect from Donald Trump after the inauguration and beyond? Chris Spears speaks with the president of a conservative grassroots network. With wildfires displacing thousands across Los Angeles County, a donation center is providing food, clothing, and hope to those in need. Christina Corona takes us to the heart of the relief efforts, where the community is coming together. And President Biden will deliver his farewell address tonight from the Oval Office. With just days left in office, the administration releases a list of accomplishments they are proud of, including a record number of measures that protect land and water. Jason Blair has the highlights.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has been announced. President-elect Trump first broke the news in a post on Truth Social, saying the ceasefire agreement had been reached and that the hostages would be released shortly. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Residents in the Gaza Strip were seen celebrating on Wednesday, many of them anticipating that a ceasefire would happen soon. And it did, according to what President-elect Trump posted on Truth Social. Trump said that a deal in the Middle East had been reached and that the hostages would be released shortly. Trump's announcement of the ceasefire came just a week after he said, quote, "All hell will break out in the Middle East if the hostages aren't released by the time he takes office." Qatar, which has been mediating the talks, also announced the news on Wednesday. Qatar's prime minister, who is also the country's foreign minister, said the ceasefire is set to begin on Sunday, January 19th, one day before Trump takes office. He gave further details at the briefing, which were heard through an interpreter.
The phase one of the agreement will go on for 42 days, and it will include a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces to the east away from populated areas. Israeli forces will then be positioned along the Gaza border, and which will allow for the swap of prisoners as well as the swap of remains and the return of the displaced people to their residences.
He said that 33 hostages would be released, but he did not say how many Palestinian prisoners would be released. President Biden, however, said hundreds of Palestinian prisoners were going to be released, and he added this.
The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council.
As Biden was leaving, someone asked him whether he or Trump would get the credit.
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Meanwhile, in Israel, many people are happy, but not everyone is celebrating, including this cousin of a hostage held in Gaza.
We now need to wait 42 days just for 33 people to come back. And it's going to be 3 on the first day, and just a week after another 4, and a week after another, I don't know exactly how much, and it's going to continue for 42 days. It's I have no words to describe it, how difficult it is.
My brother is going to come at the first stage, but we don't know what his condition is, and we don't know if he's alive or dead, or we don't know nothing. Nobody tell us nothing, and we hope that we will have a miracle and my brother will come alive.
Meanwhile, the family members of the other 65 hostages not named in the first exchange continue to hope for their release. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Both President Biden and President-elect Trump stressing their roles in achieving today's success. The ceasefire deal follows months of deadlock in negotiations and sets the stage for potentially years of rebuilding in Gaza. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from West Palm Beach.
And President Biden stresses that he's the one who came up with this exact ceasefire deal back in May and that was ultimately reached under his term. But he also acknowledges that Trump's team was involved, adding that Trump will be the one to implement it.
In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. It would have to be implemented by the next team. So I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do.
Trump, meanwhile, announced the deal about 2 hours before Biden did. In a statement, Trump takes credit, saying this epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, adding we have achieved so much without even being in the White House. The State Department on Wednesday said while the deal was conceived of by the current administration, Trump's team
has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line.
And Trump is now vowing to make sure that Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's called to thank both Biden and Trump, adding that he's meeting with Trump soon in Washington. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Iris Tao, NTD News.
It's day 2 of Senate confirmation hearings, 6 of President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees appearing before Senate committees. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, joins us with the latest on the confirmation process.
Pam Bondi, Trump's pick for Attorney General after Matt Gaetz stepped down from consideration, had her confirmation hearing this Wednesday, a very partisan hearing with Senate Republicans highlighting the need for reform within the Justice Department and Senate Democrats grilling Pam Bondi over her involvement in the election fraud claims that the Trump campaign made back in 2021.
Ms. Bondi is highly qualified. And of course, as we all know, a change is desperately needed.
It is critical that any nominee for this position be committed first and foremost to the Constitution and the American people, not any president or political agenda. But President Trump claims he has, quote, an absolute right to do what he wants with the Justice Department. And that's how he conducted his first term.
Senator Durbin, the Democratic ranking member of the Senate's Judiciary Committee, was critical of Pam Bondi's involvement in the Trump campaign's election fraud claims, but has already thrown his support behind Senator Marco Rubio, who is Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, one of Trump's few nominees to receive support from Democrats.
They want a strong America engaged in the world, but guided by a clear objective: to promote peace abroad and security and prosperity here at home. That is the promise that President Trump was elected to keep. And if I am confirmed, keeping that promise will be the core mission of the United States Department of State.
Another nominee likely to receive bipartisan support is former Congressman John Ratcliffe, who is Trump's pick to be the next director of the CIA. Ratcliffe has already been confirmed back in 2017 when he was selected by President Trump during his first period to be his director of national intelligence.
The Chinese Communist Party remains committed to dominating the world economically, militarily, and technologically. Transnational criminal organizations are flooding American communities with violence and deadly narcotics. The Russia-Ukraine war wages on, spreading devastation and increasing the risk of the United States being pulled into a conflict with a nuclear power.
Sean Duffy, Chris Wright, and Russ Vaught, Trump's nominees for Secretary of Transportation, Energy, and Office of Management and Budget, respectively, also had their confirmation hearings this Wednesday ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration next Monday. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A flag controversy is brewing ahead of Inauguration Day. Flags have flown at half-staff since former President Jimmy Carter's death on December 29th, following federal guidelines for a 30-day mourning period. House Speaker Mike Johnson, however, has ordered flags at the Capitol raised to full staff on January 20th, saying that Inauguration Day represents a moment of national unity. Flags will return to half-staff on January 21st, continuing the tribute to President Carter's legacy. Several Republican governors, including Texas Governor Greg Abbott, have also ordered state flags raised for the inauguration. Meanwhile, President-elect Trump criticized the Biden administration's decision to keep flags at half-staff on Inauguration Day. Former First Lady Michelle Obama has confirmed she will not attend the upcoming inauguration of President-elect Trump on January 20th. Her husband, former President Barack Obama, will be present. The Obama's office provided no reason for Michelle Obama's absence. Her decision follows a similar move earlier this month when she did not attend the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. President-elect Trump isn't even in office, and he's already impacting the world. He brought Mexico and Canada to the table over border security through the threat of tariffs, and he sparked international debate over the possibility of annexing Greenland and reclaiming the Panama Canal. What might he look to accomplish in the first 100 days after re-entering the White House on Monday? Chris Spears spoke with Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservative Caucus, a grassroots network founded in 1974.
Donald J. Trump is set to become the 47th president of the United States on Monday, but he's already impacting issues like border security, foreign diplomacy, and business optimism. I asked Conservative Caucus President Jim Pfaff what explained Trump's pre-inaugural impact.
The Trump effect is essentially just a strong person who is willing to do what's right at the right time as best as he can judge it, and to not back down when there's risk of failure in what he's trying to accomplish.
Pfaff further unpacks the so-called Trump effect into three key elements.
First of all, Donald Trump's sort of art of the deal approach to all these things. He's not going to let you know what he's really thinking. He's going to throw out things to throw you off guard. The second part is a firm belief in the American values that have made us a great country. Strong defense, economic prosperity that's based on the individual, and a firm, unimpeachable resolve to act.
Trump's first act as president will be to give his inaugural address. He's been a vocal public figure since 2016, and the economy was the biggest issue this election cycle, so the content of that speech might not be hard to guess.
It seems to me that three major things will be discussed in his inaugural address. The first one's economic prosperity. I think he's going to talk about fixing immigration, and he'll tout what Tom Homan's going to do and the resolve that he has to fix these immigration policies. Predict that he's going to touch on what he intends for RFK Jr. to do to change our healthcare system.
President-elect Trump has said he would pardon some prisoners held after the January 6th arrests. His partnership with Elon Musk during the 2024 presidential race led to presidential advisory group, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's aimed at trimming the federal budget.
I think he's also going to talk about the Department of Government Efficiency effort, the DOGE effort, because the combination of Elon Musk and also what Russell Vought, who's coming into the Office of Management and Budget, can do to reduce government from the executive branch end, I think is going to be a key focus. It's something that he's talked about.
On the campaign trail, Trump joked he'd have a tiny desk next to the inauguration podium so he could start signing executive orders immediately after his speech. While there hasn't been an official announcement about that, the soon-to-be president is expected to sign numerous executive orders in the first few hours and days of his next administration.
It may be the biggest day of executive order signing in American history. Immigration and border security, energy and environmental policy, some economic policies related mostly probably to tariffs and China, the federal workforce regulatory reform. So it's going to be a very ambitious first week.
Some parts of Trump's agenda won't be enacted through executive orders, but through Congress. In his first 100 days in office, he'll have the momentum from his election win, plus a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. Pfaff thinks congressional Republicans could pass a bill that extends or makes permanent the Trump tax cuts and that addresses immigration. Chris Spears, NTD News.
With the LA wildfires displacing thousands, many are in desperate need of basic necessities. NTD's Christina Corona was at one of the largest donation centers in the area.
We're here in the city of Arcadia at the Santa Anita Park, which has been transformed into a huge donation center. It's one of the largest donation centers in the Los Angeles area, where hundreds of volunteers are helping many residents who may have been displaced due to the wildfires. As you can see behind me, hundreds of items are organized by department, from clothing, shoes, to pet supplies, to first aid. You name it, they have it here at this donation center.
The process begins with residents showing identification. Once verified, they're paired with a volunteer who guides them through the designated area to access items and essential supplies. I spoke with the lead volunteer, who provided further insight into how the system operates.
We have everything organized from kids, men's, women's. We have some food vendors that are going to be dropping it off as well. So it's really a very strong community effort, which is pretty awesome.
They have a wide variety of items available, including diapers, baby formula, hygiene products for men and women, books and toys for children, and even supplies for pets, such as food for dogs, cats, hamsters, and birds, along with pet toys and leashes. Volunteers are on hand to assist residents, even helping carry items if needed. Many traveled from across the state to lend a hand. I spoke with one couple who drove from Northern California to donate hundreds of items to support those in need.
Well, we actually, from the Central Valley in Fresno, we brought about 8 pallets of waters. We brought dog food, we brought Pampers, we brought shoes and socks.
Obviously, most of them don't have homes, so they're just going to take what they can. Right now, I think they're just mainly hungry. They do care about other stuff, but yeah, food is essential to everybody right now.
After collecting their items, residents can enjoy free groceries to take home, as well as hot meals served by food trucks.
So if you have any donations that you would like to drop off, you can drop it off here at the Santa Anita Park. However, they did notify me that they will stop accepting donations this Friday. Reporting from the city of Arcadia, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Ahead of President Biden's farewell address tonight, the Biden administration releases a list of its achievements over the past 4 years, one being that Biden has conserved more lands and waters than any other president. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
With a few days left in office, the Biden administration highlights accomplishments under the president, including getting past the COVID-19 pandemic, lowering prescription drug prices for seniors, and protecting a record amount of land and water. In a statement, Biden says, "It's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. I have given my heart and soul to our nation, and I have been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people." The administration says that during his presidency, Biden has conserved 674 million acres of lands and waters, more than any other president in history. Within this includes establishing, expanding, and restoring 15 national monuments, including the Chuckwalla and Satitla highlands, which cover 848,000 acres in California, as well as expanding the San Gabriel Mountains and Berryessa Snow Mountain national monuments in California.
Our outdoor treasures are the pride of our country, the bond between the physical and spiritual world, a bridge to our past and to our future. Conserving them not only protects the livelihoods of people who depend on them, it preserves a key piece of our history.
Biden's office says it's protected 625 million acres of waters off the U.S. coast from oil and gas drilling, and has increased outdoor access and wildlife habitats by designating Camp Hale. The administration says it secured historic protections in Alaska with 13.3 million acres in the western Arctic and 28 million acres across the state, as well as established 3 national marine sanctuaries, 6 new national wildlife refuges, and restored wild salmon, steelhead, and other native fish in the Columbia River Basin. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, how will President-elect Trump handle sanctions on Russia? Arian Pazdar has what American and Ukrainian officials are saying and a hint of possible retaliation from Russia. And South Korea's impeached president has been arrested, a first for a sitting president in the country. What happens next for Yoon Suk-yeol after the break? Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Russia is hinting at possible retaliation against the U.S. over new oil sanctions. That's as American and Ukrainian officials comment on President-elect Trump's approach to sanctions. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war, starting with today's successful exchange of prisoners of war.
Russia released this footage on Wednesday, announcing a successful exchange of prisoners of war with Ukraine. The two sides reportedly exchanged 25 prisoners each in a deal mediated by the United Arab Emirates. Many of the Russian POWs used the situation to call their loved ones after having been freed. Meanwhile, in Russia, the Kremlin is hinting at possible retaliation against the US over new oil sanctions on Moscow. A spokesperson was asked how Russia will respond to the sanctions.
Nothing can be ruled out. Whatever is best in the interests of our country will be done.
The US imposed wider sanctions on Russian oil last week, targeting 2 companies as well as almost 200 vessels that have shipped Russian oil. On Wednesday, the State Department was asked whether officials are concerned President-elect Trump might lift sanctions on Russia once he takes office.
What the next administration may or may not do, they'll have to make their own decisions. We believe that the sanctions we have put in place have been effective, curbing to some extent its ability to fund its war machine, and we hope that they'll stay in place.
Also on Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commented on Trump's approach to sanctions.
We expect active cooperation in the spirit of the peace through strength approach. We count on the strengthening of sanctions against Russia.
Zelensky made the remarks while speaking alongside Poland's prime minister. The prime minister accuses Russia of having planned acts of terrorism.
Russia was planning acts of terrorism in the air, not only against Poland, but also against airlines worldwide.
This comes after packages exploded at logistics depots in Europe. Security officials say the explosions were part of a test run for a Russian plot to trigger explosions on cargo flights to the US. Moscow has denied any involvement in the explosions. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol has been transferred to a detention center near Seoul. He was questioned by anti-corruption officials who took him into custody this morning. In a video message before his arrest, Yoon said that the rule of law in the country had completely collapsed. His lawyers tried to persuade investigators not to use the detention warrant and said the president would voluntarily appear for questioning, but the request was denied. Here's more.
South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol was arrested Wednesday, a first for a sitting president of the country. It's the latest turn in a political crisis sparked by his short-lived declaration of martial law last month, which eventually saw Yoon hiding out at his residence for weeks protected by personal security to avoid authorities who wanted to detain him on grounds of insurrection. More than 3,000 police officers marched on Yoon's residence Wednesday, and a motorcade later took him to the country's anti-corruption agency, the CIO, or the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. South Korean journalists snapped the moment he stepped out of the car and into the agency's offices in Gwacheon, just south of Seoul. Investigators have 48 hours to question him. After that, they must release him or seek a warrant to detain him for longer. In a video message recorded before his detention, Yoon said he turned himself in for questioning to avoid any bloodshed and disputed the legality of the investigation and arrest.
Today, when I saw them break into the security area using firefighting equipment, I decided to respond to the CIO's investigation, despite it being an illegal investigation, to prevent unsavory bloodshed. However, that doesn't mean I am acknowledging the investigation of the CIO.
Earlier in the morning, scuffles broke out between Yoon's supporters and police who were trying to arrest him. His lawyers have said the arrest warrant is illegal. They say it was issued by a court in the wrong jurisdiction, and the team set up to investigate him has no legal mandate to do so. Lawmakers voted to impeach Yoon last month after his martial law order on December 3rd ushered in unprecedented political turmoil. In a previous attempt to arrest Yoon on January 3rd, the Presidential Security Service and military guards blocked CIO investigators in a 6-hour standoff. The agency has since apologized for initially failing to arrest Yoon on that day. Separately, the country's constitutional court is deliberating whether to uphold Yoon's impeachment and permanently remove him from office or restore his presidential powers.
Coming up, the Senate holds a confirmation hearing for Secretary of State nominee Senator Marco Rubio. A retired U.S. Navy captain joins us to review the highlights of the hearing and the future of U.S. foreign policy. As TikTok's time in the U.S. could be running out, a large number of its users flock to another Chinese app, Rednote, describing themselves as TikTok refugees. We took a look at what this app is and the controversies surrounding it. And the Securities and Exchange Commission is suing Elon Musk, the agency accusing him of waiting too long to disclose a large stake in Twitter back in 2022. That and more when we return. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. Israel and the Hamas terrorist group reached a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Under phase one of the deal, Hamas will release 33 hostages over 6 weeks, and Israeli forces will withdraw from populated areas in Gaza. Firefighters reported significant gains against the two massive wildfires burning around Los Angeles, but the region is still on alert as winds begin picking up during a final round of dangerous fire weather. Senate committees held confirmation hearings for 6 of President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees. They include Pam Bondi for Attorney General, John Ratcliffe for CIA Director, and Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. Joining us now to react to the confirmation hearing for Marco Rubio is Armin Kurdian, retired U.S. Navy captain and political strategist. Armin, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, to begin, how do you think the confirmation hearing for Marco Rubio went today?
I think Marco Rubio is a brilliant individual. Good afternoon, Tiffany. And I think he has already gotten a lot of positive accolades from his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. He has a very strong grasp of the issues that face this country, and is very intelligent, very well spoken, and also very well rounded. And I think he's going to get a lot of Democrats to vote for him when this is all done and said.
To your point, it does seem this was the friendliest of the confirmation hearings so far. Now, Rubio said in his opening statement, quote, "The 21st century will be defined by what happens between the United States and China." How do you see relations between the U.S. and China going forward under President Trump and Rubio as Secretary of State?
It needs to be a lot more frank, a lot more direct. China has been taking advantage of the United States in a lot of different ways. We know a lot of the issues they have with trade, but of course, the intellectual property theft, especially from our defense industry. If you just look at a lot of their mainline aircraft, their submarines and their systems and equipment, it very much is similar to our own. So that's going to be a big problem that needs to stop. Also, a lot of these cyber attacks, which the Chinese government says it wasn't us, but I'm certain it was a lot of their proxies or perhaps some kind of public-private partnership that's going after the United States. We're going to have to get a lot more aggressive with this kind of thing. China has said they want to be ready to have a military that could mobilize and, say, take Taiwan by the year 2027. That's going to happen during the next administration. And China has been building a lot of missiles, a lot of other weapons that could actually make that happen. And in a lot of the scenarios, the war games that the U.S. fights against a virtual Chinese adversary, the U.S. does not do well and doesn't always win. So I think the U.S. is going to project a lot more strength, and we're going to have to get a lot more of our allies involved in order to try at least keep China contained.
Now, during Senator Rubio's hearing, the news broke that Israel and Hamas had agreed to the ceasefire and hostage deal. Now, Rubio didn't have a comment on that at the time. Now, the former IDF spokesperson saying on CNN last night that with Trump's threat that there would be hell to pay if hostages weren't released by the time he returned to office, no party wanted to be the one to spoil the deal. What do you make of the argument that Trump was the driving force behind this deal?
I think it's absolutely correct, because that is a change in the calculus for Hamas. That is a big thing that changed on November 5th following the election. And I think it also has to do a lot more with how Trump handled the nation of Iran during his administration, and will do the same thing again. So Iran is perhaps hopeful that if they can compel Hamas to surrender, and I can't believe for a second that Iran hasn't been working behind the scenes telling Hamas, hey, you guys need to let the hostages go or it's going to be really, really bad for us, that this is a big impetus and a big reason why this has happened. As for the rest of the structure of the deal in terms of the number of hostages that are going to be released, the number of prisoners that are going to be released, Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, I think baby steps are good. What I also heard was that initially it would be 9 hostages for 110 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. That came from a Hamas spokesman. Well, I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but regardless of what the number is, it's substantive and it's tangible. And I think Israel itself is also, they are strained fighting this war as well. It has taken an immense toll on them. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are eager on the Israeli side to see this war end.
Now, when it comes to Europe, Rubio said in terms of Russia and Ukraine, quote, there will have to be concessions made, adding this conflict needs to end. What changes might we see in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war under this new administration?
It's going to be very hard to say. Donald Trump, as I've said many times, is very, very transactional. Where we are right now, basically when Donald Trump takes office on January 20th, everything that happened beforehand is a sunk cost. There's nothing that he can do about it to change. Considering the amount of territory that Ukraine has lost to Russia, I don't know how Ukraine is going to be able to take it all back. It's going to be an exceptional challenge. Now, at the same time, Russia is also at its limit in terms of its wartime economy. I don't know how much longer they can continue on with the war. Ukraine is also suffering an incredible strain as well. I think in the end, whether or not we like it, Russia may end up with a part of Ukraine. They may get a lot of what they want, but hopefully Trump and the Western powers can perhaps exert more threats or perhaps say, hey, if you don't take, say, perhaps half a loaf, if you will, let's use that kind of an example, say, they only get to some of the territory that they managed to capture instead of all of it, that the allies, the Western powers, are going to come in even stronger to support Ukraine. And frankly, there's a lot of things that went wrong all the way up to this. This war should never have happened in the first place. We were too slow to give them military aid. Congress was very slow to act on times, engaging in politics. A 6-month delay in terms of getting Ukraine the artillery it needs. We didn't ramp up in terms of manufacturing the artillery it needs. So a lot of that also lies on us in terms of where the situation is. So we are, I think, just as much to blame for preventing this war as Russia is from starting it.
A lot to watch out for indeed. Armin Kurdian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Stephanie. Have a great day.
TikTok users are flooding Chinese social media app Rednote just days before a potential ban could remove TikTok from U.S. users' lives. Some of them have come up with a creative way to describe the trend, calling themselves TikTok refugees.
Rednote saw its U.S. downloads skyrocket nearly 200% more than last week. This according to database Sensor Tower. The Chinese app also topped the ranks of free downloads on both Apple and Google's app stores in the U.S. Another app called Lemon8 trails behind Rednote in second place. The app works almost the same as Rednote, but is predominantly English versus Rednote's default Chinese. Lemon8 also shares the same Chinese parent company, ByteDance, that's the same company as TikTok. Built with features similar to both Instagram and Pinterest, users can post photos and short videos on Rednote. It can also have chat functions and its own online shopping site. As the app's non-Chinese base grows, Chinese users are telling American newcomers about what could be considered wrong under the Chinese Communist Party's censorship rules. For example, stay away from sensitive topics the regime considers sensitive, like Taiwan, the Uyghur ethnic group, and the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Rednote has already faced criticism from users for strict censorship rules. The platform reportedly banned over 1.25 million accounts a few weeks ago. Right now, its ties with the Chinese Communist Party are facing scrutiny as more Americans flock to the app. Rednote is owned by a Shanghai-based company, and all of its data is stored in mainland China. The app is reportedly backed by Chinese tech giant Tencent. The Pentagon recently blacklisted Tencent for its alleged ties to the Chinese military. And get this, what's more is that the app's Chinese name, Xiaohongshu, means the little red book. This term refers to quotations from Mao Zedong, former head of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, under him, communists took over China and established the CCP.
If Chinese-owned and run and accessed apps are a problem. Why was Rednote even on? It's an even more Chinese app than the Chinese app we're all worried about right now, right?
With English language content flooding the app more than ever before, a Chinese user complained that the app's regulators made her wait 2 hours to check and approve her English video, something that she's never experienced before. Because of Rednote's popularity inside China, the regime has kept a close eye on the social media for years. According to Chinese media reports, Chinese authorities held talks with its executives after seeing content that violated Beijing's interests.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk has been sued by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission over his ownership stake of the platform then known as Twitter. Here are the details.
Elon Musk was sued on Tuesday by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC accused the world's richest person of waiting too long to disclose in 2022 he had amassed a large stake in Twitter, the social media company he later bought and renamed X. An SEC rule requires investors to disclose within 10 days when they cross a threshold of owning 5% or more of a company. The agency said that at the expense of unsuspecting investors, Musk instead waited 21 days to disclose his initial purchase of 5% of Twitter's common shares at artificially low prices. The SEC said Twitter's share price then rose more than 27% once Musk disclosed his stake. Tuesday's lawsuit seeks to force Musk to pay a civil fine and give up, quote, unjust profits. Alex Spiro, a lawyer for Musk, called the suit the culmination of the regulator's, quote, multi-year campaign of harassment against his client. He added the lawsuit addresses a mere, quote, alleged administrative failure to file a single form, an offense that, even if proven, carries a nominal penalty. The filing against Musk comes 6 days before Trump's January 20th inauguration, when SEC Chair Gary Gensler will step down. Trump's nomination to succeed him, Paul Atkins, is expected to review many of Gensler's rules and enforcement actions.
The Supreme Court heard a challenge today to a Texas law that requires age verification for adult websites. A trade group representing adult entertainment performers and companies argues the law violates the First Amendment. After 2 hours of oral argument, a majority of the court signaled that states should be able to impose some kind of age requirement for such websites. This is to ensure that minors can't easily access obscene material online. But several justices also flagged concerns that their ruling could spill over and affect other First Amendment rights. A decision is expected by this summer. The Texas law from 2023 is similar to 19 others enacted around the United States. Under the Texas law, adult websites must require all users to submit personally identifying information verifying that they are at least 18 years old. Challengers, including the American Civil Liberties Union, argue the law is an unacceptable burden to access constitutionally protected free speech. Some adult sites have responded by blocking access entirely in states with age verification laws. Britain will enact free speech legislation for universities amid mounting calls from leading academics, but only partially. The British government is seeking to repeal some provisions of the incoming law, which it deems burdensome. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more on this from London.
Free speech in UK universities is now set to be better secured, with a law aiming to protect students and teachers from cancel culture. Though the British government is currently implementing only parts of the law after previously pausing the full version. And this after continued and mounting pressure from academics and free speech advocates who wanted the law enacted. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson paused the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act just before it was due to take effect last August, due to concerns that the law was burdensome while not addressing hate speech on campuses. However, almost 700 academics, including several Nobel Prize winners, called on Phillipson to implement the law to protect free speech. On Wednesday, Phillipson confirmed key provisions will be brought into force.
The ability of our academics to explore and express new ideas through teaching and research is precious, and we must protect it. These fundamental freedoms are more important, much more important, than the wishes of some students not to be offended.
She said universities are not a place for students to shut down any view with which they disagree. Provisions to enact include The higher education regulator, the Office for Students, will have the power to investigate complaints over breaches of free speech, as well as the power to issue fines for breaches. The Act will also require all universities to have robust codes of conduct to ensure the protection of free speech. Universities that break the rules will be publicly held to account and could end up paying compensation, fines, or even be suspended. However, Phillipson is seeking to repeal other parts of the legislation.
The first is the duties on student unions in the Act. Students' unions are neither equipped nor funded to navigate such a complex regulatory environment.
She's also seeking repeal of another provision, one which would allow individuals to sue institutions that failed to comply with freedom of speech requirements. She said this
would create costly litigation that risks diverting resources away from students at a time when university finances are already strained.
The Department for Education also said overseas transparency provisions in the Act will be kept under review. These provisions were meant to prevent anonymous donations to universities amid concerns about foreign interference. Responding to Phillipson, Shadow Education Secretary Laura Trott asked what changes to the overseas funding provisions are being considered.
Can she confirm that none of these were discussed in the Chancellor's recent visit to China? And can she confirm that there were no deals done to amend this clause?
Phillipson did not respond to this question at the time. NTD reached out to the British Treasury, which did not respond in time for broadcast. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Coming up in college basketball, 8 ranked teams are in action tonight, including a top 10 showdown in the Big 12. Dave Martin joins us to preview the games when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in college football as Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers has declared for the NFL draft. Now, had he stayed, would Texas have been looking at a quarterback controversy?
You know, I think that was certainly a possibility because behind him is backup Arch Manning, who was a 5-star prospect a couple of years ago. He's the nephew of Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, grandson of Archie Manning. All those guys were NFL royalty at quarterback. And a lot of it really is expected of him. And he's been in the background for 2 years, kind of waiting for his turn. If it didn't look available for next year, it's certainly possible he could have transferred. So Ewers turning pro actually kind of clears up the quarterback situation for next year for the Longhorns. Now for Ewers, he had a fantastic career, led them to the playoffs twice, passed for more than 9,000 yards. People forget they were 5-7 the year before he arrived there in Texas. Now, as for where he gets picked in the draft, I mean, there's a wide array of projections there. ESPN has him as a middle round pick. Of course, quarterback is the most difficult to project to the NFL, and yet it's the most important position to project. So we'll have to see where he goes. Definitely getting drafted, though.
Well, elsewhere in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns have been sued by the city of Cleveland over their proposed move to the suburbs. What's the reasoning here?
Yeah, they are invoking the, quote, Modell law to keep the team from leaving. Now, this is a law named after the former Cleveland Browns owner from the 1990s who moved the team to Baltimore amidst a lot of outcry from the city and fans. So much so that the state of Ohio actually passed this law that requires team owners who play in tax-supported stadiums to either obtain permission from the city to relocate or provide 6 months notice before leaving, which would allow local investors to purchase the team and presumably keep it there. Now, interestingly, they announced plans to stay in the same county, but just 15 miles south in a place called Brook Park. Now, their lease at the current stadium actually doesn't expire until 2028, so there's still time, of course, to sort this out.
Oh, shifting gears to tennis, with Novak Djokovic winning his second-round match yesterday at the Australian Open, he passed Roger Federer for the most Grand Slam matches played.
Yeah, 430 now in his career. He'd already passed Federer for most Grand Slam matches won. He's at 379. I think Federer was at 369. So yet another career record he owns. I mean, he already has the most Grand Slam titles won with 24. He has most weeks ranked number 1. Those are the two biggest. About the only major career record he doesn't have is most tour-level titles. He's at 99. Federer won 103. Jimmy Connors, though, actually number 1, 109. Now, that said, he has not been as dominant as we've come to expect in these two matches so far at the Australian Open. Both of his two matches here have been played against guys who are making their Grand Slam debuts. but he was pushed to 4 sets in both wins. His next match, though, is going to be against a much higher-ranked opponent, 25th ranked Thomas Mahach. So we'll have a better idea of where he's at after this next match.
Looking at some college basketball matchups on tonight, 8 ranked teams are in action, including your 9th ranked Kansas Jayhawks playing at number 2 Iowa State. Who do you have winning that one?
You know, I wish I could say Kansas. Playing at Iowa State is very difficult, even if they're not ranked number 2 in the country. It's probably one of the most underrated home court advantages in the whole country. Maybe it's because they're not, an annual powerhouse program. This year, they certainly are, though. They're ranked 2nd. They're 5.5-point favorites tonight. I'll just say this, I'll be pleasantly surprised if KU somehow comes out on top. Now, also in action tonight, 12th ranked Michigan State hosts Penn State, number 10 Houston hosts West Virginia, 17th ranked Purdue plays at Washington. Now, the only other top 25 matchup tonight, number 6 Tennessee against 23rd ranked Georgia. But back to the Kansas versus Iowa State game, it starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so very soon here actually, showing on ESPN2, so definitely have to check out that game.
Moments away. Davis Holmes, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.